So for this video, we're going to look at two challenge problems where we're given a geometric sequence that will contain mostly fractions, and they may even have negative numbers, and we need to figure out the next term. So for all of these problems, remember our main goal is to find the common ratio in this geometric sequence. And the common ratio we know, we can just take any of these terms and divide it by the one before it. So we can either do -8/3 and divide it by 32 over 9, or we can take 32 over 9 and divide it by -128 over 27. But just to make things simpler, let's choose the smaller numbers. So we're going to take -8/3 and we will divide it by the number before it, which is 32 over 9. And we're dividing fractions here. So it might be helpful to remind yourself how to divide fractions. And instead of using the fraction bar, I'm going to use the division symbol. So we're dividing by 32 over 9. And remember with dividing fractions that division by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal of whatever you're dividing by. So we can change this into -8/3 multiplied by this fraction flipped over, the fraction's reciprocal, so 9 over 32. And we could just multiply straight across, but let's make a few simplifications by looking diagonally across. Since 3 and 9, those are each divisible by 3, so we'll divide them each by 3. And looking diagonally the other way, 8 and 32, those are each divisible by 8. So we'll divide them each by 8. And now that we have simpler numbers, it's much easier to multiply these, and we will get a fully simplified answer. So we have -1 times 3, which is -3, and we have 1 times 4, which is 4. So our common ratio here is -3/4. So that means from one term to the next, we are multiplying by -3/4. And you could check this just to make sure that you are doing this correctly. We can use this starting term to prove that if we multiply it by what we think is our common ratio, we'll get back this next term, 32 over 9. So we can take -128 over 27, and we're going to multiply that by our common ratio, which is that -3/4. Now, again, you can make simplifications. Since notice 3 and 27, those are each divisible by 3, so that becomes 1 and 9. And 4 and 128, those are each divisible by 4. And so we get 1 and -32. Now multiplying across, we have two negatives, they cancel. So we just get 32 up top and 9 down below, which is what we expected. So this shows us that when we checked our common ratio, it was correct. So we can feel confident that -3/4 is in fact our common ratio. So let's find that next term. And to do that, we're just going to take our previous term, this -8/3, and multiply it by the common ratio. So -8 over 3 multiplied by -3 over 4. So looking diagonally across, the -3 and the 3, those are each divisible by 3. So essentially the 3's will cancel, and now we can multiply. Could also simplify 8/4, but we can do that at the end. And -8 times -1 would be +8. And 8 divided by 4, we can simplify to 2. So it looks like our next term is simply 2 here. And if we wanted, we could keep going. We could multiply 2 by this -3/4, which would give us -6/4, or -3/2. And of course, this would go on forever. So with that in mind, let's do one more problem. And this problem again will have lots of fractions and some negatives. So we can choose any two numbers we want to find our common ratio. And I would just recommend using the smaller numbers. So maybe take 3 and divide it by this -9/4. So our common ratio, we always take one term and divide it by the term before it. And since we're dividing by a fraction, this is the same thing as multiplying by this fraction flipped over. So this will be 3 times -4 over 9. And putting that over 1, carrying the multiplication out, we get -12 up top, 9 down below. And each of these are divisible by 3, so we can divide them, and we get minus 4 up top and 3 down below. So minus 4/3 is our common ratio. And from here, we could check it. We could take 27 over 16, multiply it by minus 4/3, and prove to ourselves that we would get minus 9/4. And I do encourage you, as you're practicing these and getting better at it, to check it at every step, just to get a little extra practice. And once you feel very confident about these, then we can go and find our next term. So we can take 3, and we're going to multiply it by that common ratio. And notice we have 3 up top and 3 down below, so those will cancel each other out. Let me use a different color. And we get minus 4 over 1, which is just minus 4. So it looks like our next term is negative 4. And if we wanted, we could find the term after that. We just multiply by this minus 4 over 3, which would be positive 16/3. And one way to get a general feel if this is correct, if you find the decimals for these, you'll notice that the numbers are increasing and alternating sign, which is what you'd expect here. But one thing you can do to check is to take your answer and divide it by the term before it and just prove to yourself that you will get this common ratio back.